Happy Shabbat and a special happy Pesach Matzah and Bakurim to one and all. It's the best time of year. But you wouldn't know it if you were listening to the governor of Michigan, right in the midst of, I think she's in one of the worst 4 or 5 states in the union in terms of the coronavirus, and she's one of the governors that has imposed a complete and total lockdown. You can't go to work and you can't leave your home. She made an announcement, though, in the midst of people not being able to go to work. She says, there is good news out there for all of you children. It has been requested of me, and I have designated that the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy are essential workers, so they will be able to attend to their jobs. Is that enough to make you want to scream?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, how about this? The U.S. Surgeon General, he is, the guy in the really snappy little uniform. He's Dr. Jerome Adams. He doesn't think it's a coincidence that the deadliest week of the COVID-19 virus is taking place during Holy Week. In an interview with CBN News, Adams said that it's important to rely on your faith during times like this, and I quote him, of course, I don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening at this time. During this week, we celebrate the ultimate sacrifice that was made for us. God sent his only son to die for us. Well, maybe this person never read anything God said about Dowd. To die for us, which was really sad, he said, initially, but then we saw salvation at the end of it. What a moron with a moronic God. So this excuse for a human being wants us to believe that his God saw to it that 100,000 people would die just so he would be able to make a point that he died. Oh, God. Well, it is so sad. I mean, it makes you want to puke. There is no hope for America, should you want to know. There was a poll taken of 1,000 students in the most elite colleges in the United States. And this poll said, who is most responsible for the coronavirus? Is it A, the government of China, B, Donald Trump, C, equally both of theirs, or D, neither? Do you know that almost 30% of those who responded said that Donald Trump was primarily and mostly responsible for the coronavirus? And you know that that all but 15% said that China was either not responsible or no more responsible than anyone else.
I thought it started there.
Yeah.
And they covered it up for months.
Started there. They didn't cover it up for weeks. They covered it up for months. The first case took place in October. By the end of December, the crematoria were running 24 hours a day in Hunan province.
Yeah, scary number, isn't it?
So,
wow.
But these now, the most best educated, going to the best schools, government probably paying for them to go there. And they are so stupid that they think that Donald Trump is the person most responsible for the coronavirus when he didn't have a thing to do with it. Just staggering. we're going to share some news, bits and pieces here and there. I've got probably 10 hours worth of news on the coronavirus, so we're not going to get through even a fraction of it. But there are some things that I do want to share. One is that people have been hoping that that once you get the coronavirus, your antibodies will preclude you from getting the virus again. There may be a glitch in that strategy. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention told a briefing that the virus may have been reactivated in patients that were once infected but were no longer showing signs of the disease. And they do not know if it was faulty tests, if people that have had the virus can be reinfected by the virus, or if the virus can be reactivated in a person that has previously had it. But they've had now 71 people come down with the coronavirus after they were determined cured of it. That is a serious problem. That tells you that there's a possibility that a vaccine may not work. The vaccine, gives a dead version of the disease that is designed such that your immune system is empowered to attack the actual disease. And, there are vaccines that work very well because the antibodies stay in your system for years, and there's those that work very poorly because the antibodies stay in your system for a matter of weeks. And in this case, we have no clue. Now, speaking of the aforementioned China, imagine for a moment a world where a country that starts global pandemics, then lies about it, spies on its own citizens, suppresses liberties of all kinds, perpetrates genocides on its own people, has the largest prison camp system in the world, tortures its own citizens, jails dissenters for even making light jokes, harvests organs from live prisoners, has no freedom of speech or even basic human rights. And yet, in the midst of all of this, they get awarded a leading position on an international body regarding human rights. Well, imagine no more. Last week, China was appointed to a seat on the United Nations Human Rights Council. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
In a corrupt world, money is power, and power changes everything. But only one country is the most corrupt on earth, and that is China. There's an interesting study that was reported today. It's out of Gengelt, Germany. I don't know if you guys have heard of this at all, but there are two strategies now for fighting the coronavirus and trying to mitigate its effects. One is the one that most of the world is on, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, that is failing around the world, which is deprive people of their freedoms and shut down businesses, shut down schools, take absolute and complete control of people's lives so they become completely dependent upon government and politicians. That is strategy one. It's called mitigation. The other is called the herd strategy. The herd strategy is that once a virus has infected somewhere between 40 and 60% of a population, it's over. That it no longer can find a viable host, and it cannot replicate. And if that happens rather quickly, it will occur before the virus has time to mutate, and therefore that community, that society, is now immune. It doesn't matter who comes in and who goes, social distancing, none of it matters anymore. So Germany decided they were going to do something no one has done: test 100% of a town. This community was called Gengelt. I believe it was about 70,000 people that lived there. And they tested them two ways. They were tested for the coronavirus, and they were tested for the antibodies of the coronavirus. What they found is that 15% were currently infected. And between those who were currently infected and those who had recovered, they expected to reach 50 to 70% within the next month. And at that point, the coronavirus is over. Now, at this point, would you like to speculate as to what the fatality rate was?
Well, probably still like the flu.
It's higher than the flu. The flu is 0.1% of those that infect, 1 in 1,000. This is 0.37. So between 3 and 4 times more fatal than the flu, but a tiny, tiny fraction. Tiny, tiny fraction. In fact, a whole magnitude less than anyone has forecast. The lowest forecasts have been 3 to 4%. So this is 1/10 of those numbers. Now, it's really interesting when you think about it. The average flu season kills about 600,000 people worldwide. The average flu season is just now ending. As of today, 97,000 people had died from the coronavirus, about 1/6 of the number that will die this year from the flu. Now, what I want to share is something that I did this morning. I wanted to find out, since everybody the world over seems to be talking about how not only do we need to lock down states, but you look at the questions that are asked at the press conferences, they're blaming the Trumpster for allowing 12 states not to be on total lockdown. And said, those states are jeopardizing the rest of us. And so I wanted to do a comparison. Are they right? Are we safer in states where there is a lockdown? There's 12 of them. Or where we're free. There's 12 of them. There's 12 states you can go to school. 12 states you can go to work. There's 12 states you can go to a restaurant. There's 12 states you can actually walk outside of your house. Whoa, think about that. There's 12 states that still think the U.S. Constitution isn't just a relic. There's 12 of them. And the 38 states that are that politicians think that they're the new incarnation of Genghis Khan. So I'm going to share with you the 12 states that have no lockdown, that are still free, where business goes on. You can go to work. Those 12 states are Texas. And I'm going to give you numbers. There's 2 numbers I'm going to give you. The first number is the number of infected people per million. Because if I just give you the number of people who are infected, then what is that in relationship to the population as a whole? Because there are states that are small and large. Some states have less than 1 million people, and some, like California, have 40 million. So the only thing that matters is the number of people infected and the number of fatalities per some standard, and the standard that has been used on the coronavirus is per 1 million. Okay? Texas. And I'm going to compare each of these states to a similar size state, or at least I just put these things in order. And so I'm going to compare them to at least 2 other states that are not free. So the free state, Texas. There you go, JB. 419 on infected, 8 on fatality. So 419 per million are infected, 8 per million die. Let's compare that to New York State, where 8,691 per million are infected. That'd be 20 times. And rather than 8 per million dying, 400 per million die. Now, if you want to compare Texas to the largest state in the union, a state with similar size and population density, how about California? California has been the first state to lock down the most, as you know, Kirk, the state with the least amount of freedoms. So in Texas, where there is no lockdown, 419 compared to California, 519. Texas deaths per million, 8. California, 14.
Okay, so no difference.
Tells you something ain't working here, right?
Yeah,
California is riskier than Texas. Okay, let's look at Oklahoma. 430 and 20 compared to New Jersey, 6146 and 218. But 14, 15 times greater, or Pennsylvania, 1562 and 33. How about Missouri? Missouri is another free state, 581 and 15 versus 2,160 and 108 in Michigan. With the Easter Bunny there is an essential worker, we're pleased to know. Tennessee, a non-free state, 697 and 14. Alabama, Roll Tide, 583 and 16 on infections and fatalities. Let's compare that to neighboring Louisiana, 4,128 out of a million infected, 162 mortalities. We're almost 10 times.
Wow.
Mississippi, 826 and 27. Okay, let's go to South Carolina, 563 and 14. Let's compare that to Georgia, twice the number at 1115 and 40. And Florida, 851 and 19. We don't have a single favorable comparison between free and unfree. Utah's free, 649 and 4. Compare that to Connecticut, 2732 and 106. Or Nevada, 884 and 29. How about Iowa? It's free, 405 and 9. Compare it to Massachusetts, 2773 and 74. Vermont, 1085 and 37. How about even neighboring, well, not neighboring, but, western state, New Mexico, 473 and 8. Not a single favorable comparison. Nebraska, 298 and 7. Totally free. Illinois, right next door, 1,281 and 41. How about Indiana? 1041 and 45. Or Wisconsin, 531 and 22. How about go to North Dakota, 358 and 7. Compare that to Washington State, 1335 and 62, 4 times worse. Idaho at 802, 14. Maine, 420 and 12. Still not a single favorable comparison. South Dakota, 517 and 7. Compare that to Colorado, 1,121 and 41. Rhode Island, 1907 and 46. New Hampshire, 610 and 16. How about Arkansas? Down there in Arkansas, 383 and 7. 383 and 7. Maryland, by comparison, 1,162 and 28. Virginia, 536 and 14. Oh, D.C., where the finger waggers live, 24, 35 and 56. Let's go to Wyoming, 411 and 0. Compare that to Delaware, 1273 and 24. How about compare it to Missouri, 581 and 15, or to Ohio, 505 and 20. So what I did is I took the 12 free states, and they average 465 infected per million. The leading one, the first of the not free states that I read to you, they averaged 2721. That's 6 times. You are 6 times more likely to be infected. That's 700%. 700%. 6 times more likely to be infected in one of those states where your children can't go to school, where you can't go to work, and you can't leave your home, and you can't eat in a restaurant, than you are if all of your freedoms are maintained. The national average, just want to look at the whole nation. Now, in the nation, almost 90% of Americans are not free. They've given up their freedoms. So the national average is 1479 per million versus the 12 free states of 465. So rather than these talking heads of the media scolding the president for not forcing all states with a national mandate to forfeit their freedoms so that they shut down their economy so no one works and everyone is dependent on government and no one can even go to school, they ought to be screaming the other way. If the not free states were 10% better than the free states or 20% better, you'd still say it wasn't worth shutting everything down. If they were 50% better, you'd say it still wasn't worth shutting everything down. But they're not better. They're 6 times worse. As it relates to mortalities, in the free states, the average mortality from the coronavirus is 9.5 per million. The national average is 55. Almost 6 times again. You're almost 6 times more likely to die if they take away all of your freedoms. And that's just in the first phase. Just in the first phase. Because that doesn't count the suicides that will happen for job loss. The suicides that will happen because of no social contact. The people who are going to be killed in anarchy because they start robbing other people's homes because they can't find food.
Yeah.
The huge increase in domestic violence since they've started to do this. Now let's look at nations. There are 3 totally free nations in the world right now. The nation that has handled the coronavirus the best, the nation that has handled the coronavirus the second best, and an exemplary nation in Europe. What nation has handled the coronavirus the best in terms of percentage of their people that have been affected and the percentage of their people that have died?
Yeah, we talked about them last week.
It's the nation that WHO, which we're going to talk about sometime tonight, because what you have is a Marxist terrorist at the head of WHO. Trump was right about that guy. I just hope he stays to the knitting and withdraws all U.S. funding. The nation he won't even talk about that from WHO's perspective, because they're in bed with the communist Chinese, doesn't even exist. Taiwan. Taiwan's numbers. Catch this. Taiwan's infection rate. And Taiwan had a higher percentage of their people having direct contact with Hunan province than any other nation on earth.
Really? Well, that makes sense. That makes sense, sure.
It's the Taiwanese that set up all those factories. Not all of them, but most of them. Taiwan's infection rate, where, the free states we were saying wasn't this spectacular. They're 465 versus the United States as a whole, which is 1,500. Taiwan's is 16.
It's amazing.
16 versus 1,500 in the United States. 16. The mortality rate in Taiwan, where we said, it's spectacular, and the free states at 9.5 compared to the not free states at 55. Well, Taiwan is 0.25 versus 55. Yeah, 200 times better than the United States.
But that's a huge population in Taiwan. That is a staggering number to be.
Yeah.
That's not a small.
24 million.
It's concentrated.
24 million people. Highly concentrated. Everything you can have that could possibly be bad. And South Korea. Now, South Korea, it's 204 and 4. Spectacular numbers. Sweden is 959 and 86. All right. What do you think that South Korea and Taiwan did that was their primary defense against the Hunan People's Communist Party of China virus?
Wasn't that the one we talked about last week with the Google enlisting Google?
That is correct. Cell phones. Cell phones. They did exactly the opposite of what we're doing in America. They immediately tracked and put a geographic fix and a time code on where, and put it on a map of where everyone was that has tested positive. And if you were in that proximity with your cell phone at the same location, approximately the same time, or within hours of that time, then you were told to go get tested because you were possibly infected. That was their number one tactic. Second thing they did is that if you were tested, you were moved into quarantine, not so that you wouldn't infect other people.
Not put in the same hospital as all the sick people who are at the most risk of dying from it.
Yep, yes, that is correct. And that people wore masks. And they did a really good thing. Like Taiwan, if you look at their schools, they made these little plastic barricades they put on the kids' desks. So it was a three-sided little barricade. The kids could still see their teacher. But, they were kind of closed in a little bit from the student to the right and left and in front of them. And then they all wore their little masks. The constant hand washing. If you were in South Korea, in a large building you walked into, somebody there taking your temperature, and you immediately washed your hands going into the building. They just did smart stuff.
Common sense.
They did, but restaurants weren't shut down. Businesses weren't shut down. None of them. Public transportation wasn't shut down. Schools weren't shut down. Parks weren't shut down. They didn't shut anything down. Now, Sweden just said, we trust our people. This is what we advise people do, and they can do what they choose to do. Now, Europe's having an absolute conniption fit over Sweden because they want to say that because the rest of Europe is on lockdown, that Sweden and their bars and restaurants still being open, their playgrounds and their schools too, that the government is just relying on voluntary action, and we can't have that. So the media is just excoriating Sweden. And the Trumpster even said, yeah, Sweden did that. They're doing the herd mentality. They call it the herd, and Sweden is suffering very, very badly, Trump said on Tuesday. No, they're not. No, they're not. In fact, the infection rate in the United States is 50% greater than it is in Sweden. Trumpster. I'm sorry. And then you have all of these, where did these people get their degrees for journalism? Anyway, the Swedish government is confident that its policy can work. Foreign Minister Ann Linde told Swedish TV on Wednesday that Trump was factually wrong, that is correct, to suggest that Sweden is following the herd immunity theory of letting enough people catch the virus while protecting the vulnerable, meaning that the country's population builds up an immunity to the disease, which, by the way, is intelligent. Sweden's strategy, she said, is no lockdown, and we're simply relying on our people to take responsibility for themselves. Boy, what a great idea. That sounds kind of like Yahowah, doesn't it? The country's epidemiologist, Anders Tegnell, also pushed back against Trump's criticism that Sweden was doing badly. I think Sweden is doing okay, told the CNN affiliate. It's producing quality results the same way it's always done. So for Swedish healthcare, it is handling the pandemic in a fantastic way. Now, one of these journalists came out and said, but it's not true. Sweden has 9,000 cases and 793 deaths, and therefore, you look at them and compare them to like the UK, they're doing much worse than the UK. They're doing much worse than Denmark. They're doing much worse than neighboring Norway. In fact, they actually said it's estimated 3.1% of Swedish population was infected compared to 0.41 in Norway and 2.5% in the UK. I did a little fact check. Guess what? It's not true. Remember Sweden's numbers, 959 and 86. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm not making fun of this virus. It's a deadly virus. I'm making fun of all of the idiots in the media and the politicians who have responded stupidly. Sweden, 959 and 86. Much better than the United States. Let's compare that to another northern nation. How about Ireland? Ireland's 1,638 and 58. Norway, the one that this reporter said was doing so much better, 10 times better than Sweden, right? Norway, its neighbor. Norway, infection, 1162 versus 969. How about Denmark? 1,005 versus 969. Total lockdown. How about Belgium? Twice as bad in Belgium, 2301 versus and 260 deaths versus 959 and 86. Netherlands, another northern tier country, 1348 and 147. Iceland's on complete lockdown, 4829 and 18. Switzerland, well, they love lockdowns in Switzerland, 2837 and 116. Oh, the queen of lockdown, Spain, 4 times worse, 3358 and 342. Italy, oh, you should see a drone fly over a street in Italy. Ain't nobody working in Italy. No one going to school in Italy. No one's in the streets in Italy. Okay. 2441 and 312. Germany, 1434 and 32. France, oh, that's the country of utter and complete lockdowns. 1913 and 202. Remember they said the UK was so much better? Mm-hmm. 1086 and 132. Portugal, 1517 and 43. Austria, another total lockdown, 1505 and 35. If you were to compare them, the not free countries, 1985 and 122 versus Sweden at 959 and 86. But if you were to compare those 3 free countries to the free, not free countries, it's 7 times safer to live in one of the free countries. You know what the number 1 place in the world is in terms of a independent country, in terms of the infection rate? The land of Babylon, Vatican City, 9,988. They win the prize. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi cautioned President Donald Trump against reopening the country too soon and suggested the House of Representatives might not even return to Washington, D.C. at the end of April as planned, as the coronavirus pandemic continued to spiral. In a Thursday interview with Politico, when she was asked if she was worried about Trump reopening the country too soon, Pelosi said, "I would hope that the scientific community would weigh in and say, you can't do this. It's only going to make matters worse if you go out too soon." Well, you would think that Miss Pelosi would have a calculator. I bought mine for $9. It took me about 20 minutes this morning to tabulate the results of the free countries and free states versus the not free countries and not free states, and found out that the politicians made a horrible decision. And what they're doing now is they're crediting their stupid decision with favorable results, because the models they use to justify locking down not only America but much of the world were grotesquely errant. And they're saying, well, it's because we're doing so well that these numbers are down. That's why we need to continue them. All the while, we're in a free fall economically that's going to be worse than the Great Depression. She says, it's the data. We have to pay attention to the data. I just shared the data with you. People have talked about flattening the curve. Now, flattening the curve has the following advantages. If you flatten the curve, you're going to have the same number of people sick. So I should say, so flatten the steep curve, flat curve, same number of people get infected and die. It's just that with a steep curve, it all happens very quickly, and in a flat curve, it happens over a longer period of time. Okay? So, what are the advantages of a flatter curve? Gives you more time to build quarantine centers and equip them. Do you know that the state of Washington was one of the first quarantine centers that was built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? Would you like to know what the occupancy is?
Probably nothing.
Zero.
Zero. Not a single patient.
Yeah.
Not a single patient has entered it, and it's about to be taken down. I saw pictures of McCormick Place. That was my home away from home when I was in business for all those many years. They turned the largest convention center in the United States into a hospital. It's unused. And as a matter of fact, I saw a report this morning on all hospitals in the state of Illinois, and particularly those in the Chicago area.
Yeah.
They're hugely under capacity. So this idea, apart from New York and maybe some places in New Jersey, that we needed to flatten the curve, we were told over and over again, so that we did not overwhelm our hospitals, with the exception of the 2 weeks in New York and in New Jersey. Didn't turn out to be that way at all. A vital capacity. There was no advantage of flattening the curve to provide more centers and equip them. The second reason that you want to flatten the curve is provide more time for therapeutics. Now, how many there are so far that have been tested successly? That would be none. None. Yeah. The one that Trump has touted the most, Consicorican, the malaria drug, which is the drug I've actually taken because I had malaria. They cannot. It came to fame when a French doctor said he had about 18 patients, and he said, they had a much better result than in fact, he didn't have a control group. He just said that the 18 patients he gave it to had very favorable results. So the French have been trying to replicate the test. They cannot generate the same results. The couple of doctors here and there that say, we've tested it with some of our patients, but same thing is true. There is no credible testing whatsoever that indicates that it is a benefit. And there are lots of things that are being developed that one of them may work. I think that the Israelis, for example, are fairly close on a therapeutic that may work. But by the time that it is it's developed, properly tested, mass-produced, rolled out, given to a large population group, you're 6 to 9 months away. Well, the next reason that you would want a flatter curve is you can create, test, and deploy a vaccine. You know what the earliest estimates are for a vaccine that can be created, tested, and deployed on the coronavirus?
Maybe a year and a half.
That's it.
I heard that somewhere.
18 months.
Yeah, I heard that somewhere.
By that time, this thing will have mutated and either be vicious, which the vaccine won't work, or it'll be a non-factor. In other words, there are no advantages of flattening the curve other than you have destroyed your economy, you've completely deprived people of their freedoms, and you've destroyed the credibility of your Constitution. And you've empowered exceedingly evil people, and they don't give up power easily. The disadvantage of this is that liberty is quarantined, economies are destroyed for longer periods of times, gives the virus a lot more time to mutate, and when it mutates, it becomes deadlier. When you restrict the number of people, which is what we're doing, that virus seeks to survive, and so it mutates. The world never recovers. Go ahead, Kirk.
Well, I was going to ask you two things. One is my curiosity is how did this thing spread? Did it spread so rapidly because of air travel and business travels? I mean, how did it get so many places so fast?
Well, it didn't actually. Misinformation. This virus began in the Hunan province of China back in October. Some even say September.
I've heard that
But
too.
by the end of December, in fact, I just listened to about a 30-minute phone call between the inspector, a Communist Party member in Hunan, and the number 2 person over the second largest crematorium in Hunan province. It is an exceedingly enlightening review, and they were running that crematoria 20 hours a day. All 11 of the furnaces, and I've done the math on the crematoria. It's each of them over, and this was the interview. Then took place towards the early February. They continued to run them through the first week of March at that pace. You do the math from the end of December when they said that they were getting 5 to 6 times more bodies than would be normal, and that it was continuing to rise. It's about 80,000 people in Hunan that were cremated during that period. Now, if you realize that they would normally in that same period have about 30,000 that would die of normal causes, it was 80,000 just of the coronavirus. The Chinese knew about the coronavirus, the Chinese government, the doctors, back in October. By December, it was a full-on epidemic in China. It was deadly as all get out, running the crematoria around the clock. And they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the world until sometime in late January, early February. So it did not spread quickly. It spread very slowly. You know, thousands of people left the Hunan province and went around the world. And you go to a place like Italy, where the patient zero was somebody that was working and visiting in the Hunan province, flew into to Italy, and the president of Italy, I think it was the president, it wasn't the president, no, I think it was actually one of the governors in northern Italy where the disease has been so deadly, said we just shouldn't be talking about this virus and giving it a racist implication and speaking of it coming from China. So what we ought to do, and I'm encouraging all Italians, go hug a Chinese person. Go hug a Chinese person. Yeah, they did. And look at the deaths that have resulted.
That's a true story. Wow. I thought that was just...
Well, that's a true story.
Oh. Wow. Man.
Oh, it's... The whole thing is just so extraordinary.
Okay, second part of my question.
Yes.
This is really good. You sure you don't want to get Jerry to book you somewhere?
No.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Trump got into a little pissing contest with the head of WHO, and he said WHO really blew it, and WHO is way too loyal to the Chinese government. The Chinese government provided token of their funding. The United States provides the majority of their funding, and it's just inappropriate that they would be part of the problem and work with China as a cover-up. And so the person who is masquerading as a doctor, he's not, and he likes his name Tedros. Well, it's Tedros and Handsome Ghebreyesus. But he has quite a history. This fellow does. He's a Marxist. He's a terrorist. He is a Marxist. He is a terrorist. And not a low-ranking terrorist. He served on the Politburo, the governing body of the Marxist-Leninist Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. He served as the Minister of Health after that under Prime Minister Zenawi, who founded the Marxist-Leninist League of Tigray. which the world views as a terrorist organization. So he was a leader in a terrorist organization. And he is a Marxist-Leninist. That's the reason he gets along so well with China. He is the guy that invited China to engage in Ethiopia in all manner of health reforms, where he integrated the Chinese into the Ethiopian society. That's who this fellow is. He is a Marxist ideologist. He is speaks himself of having a fruitful and comprehensive relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. He is not a medical doctor. He was appointed to this position because he was supported by the Chinese Communist regime, which is why he got this position. And he serves as their lapdog in Ethiopia. That's the truth. And the United States provides more of its funding than anything else. And when China covered up the SARS virus in 2002 and 2003, he helped them cover it up. When Ethiopia had an outbreak of cholera, he covered it up. Marxists are always willing to lie. Why would their citizens ever trust them? If there's one thing that came out of this coronavirus, it ought to be that as bad as Islamic governments are, as bad as some of these governments in Europe are, as bad as our own government is, the two worst governments in the world in terms of depriving people of freedom and of not allowing the truth are China and North Korea, both communist. If you are a supporter of Bernie Marcus in America, shame on you. Maybe that's enough news for right now. Kirk, I know that I guess I'll just share one thing, is that when I first came out with saying that the cure was going to be worse than the disease, and that the consequence of shuttering our economy, of depriving people of their freedom, of people having no social contact, of not even being able to work for a living to support themselves and their families, was going to be vastly more costly than this disease, I thought perhaps I was out on a limb until I read Dr. Yah's Torah advice. And once I read his advice, I said, you can't be wrong if you're on the same side as God is, if you share his perspective. And that's why before this program this morning, I decided, I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I haven't done really since the Shattering Myths days. I'm going to read some 30 or 40 news articles. I'm going to copy and paste some of the more interesting things. And I'm going to do a little research on my own because I like numbers and I want to do a comparison. And so I'm here to tell you, folks, you've been hoodwinked by your government. You've been hoodwinked by the media. They have made this thing a mess and have destroyed the Constitution. They have destroyed your freedoms, your ability to work for a living, and the truth, making the matters worse as it relates to this particular disease. One of the reasons God doesn't like governments. So, Kirk, you did your own form of translating and analysis of Dr. Yah's comments in Korah, Invitations, Leviticus 13, 45, and 46. Did you not?
Well, I haven't finished the 46 in form. I'm a very slow typist, and I just discovered there's a thing called a save button about 2:30 this morning.
Yeah, but I have to say I'm impressed because I got my first and second text from you, and all the time we've been together, I got a text from you. I think Paint probably helped.
He did.
And I got an email with a Word document and an email attachment, all in the same week.
Oh,
whoa!
I may have to take an aspirin.
You are joining the technical revolution.
Welcome to the 2000s.
Oh yeah.
He'll be on Facebook next week.
No, well, no,
I can see him. I can see him on Twitter. Kirk is, for those who are listening, is the most analog of analog people there ever. I've always viewed myself as I'm an analog guy in a digital world, and I like my analog. Yeah, and I like my analog, I think, for the same reason you do, Kirk. It provides perspective. You know, if you look at a watch, for example, with hands on it, you get it's a picture of time as opposed to just the flashing numbers. And so I just like analog. Now, in today's world, analog would be walking up to somebody and having a conversation with them, looking at their expression, using real words and sentences. That would be analog.
What a concept.
What a concept. Yeah, as opposed to twittering, which would be digital. So anyway, so what did you learn, Kirk? Do you want me to read these two first and then you share?
Well, you certainly can. This is just the first verse because I'm a slow typist. And what I did one other thing that was really stupid. I put in the ancient Hebrew lettering system. And when the first time I put it in to change, to actually show the pictures, pictographs, it changed everything into pictographs, and then I was just lost. So I mean, this is a real learning curve for me, but I will have that.
I'm actually I'm still having trouble, and maybe somebody can help me one of these days. But when I moved to a new computer on the boat, which has a different version of Word and a different version of Windows operating system, the Semitic Early, which is the font and it's a true type font that we have been using to be able to type in the Paleo Hebrew. It doesn't work. I have downloaded it. I can show it in my computer. I can go to fonts and I can type in it in the font menu. But try to type in it into a document, I've had to stop using it. I cannot make it work in a document anymore. And if somebody out there is smarter than me, which would be most of you, and somebody out there has a moment and can share with me how I get it to work, again, I would love to be able to use it because there's teaching to be had.
Check out Office 365
in there. Yeah. What is it? JB, what?
He's listening to his daughter.
And when we, you might look into Office 365. It's an online version of Office. So no matter what computer you go to, it's the same Office that you're opening. And any fonts you install will carry over completely.
Okay.
Wow. All right. Went over my head, but okay.
Okay. So
basically, you can go to any computer in the world and access the same exact document in the same exact way.
Yes.
Well, I tipped my...
Okay, so this is what Yahweh said. He said, then the person infected with the contagious disease, Matzorah, the individual with a serious and dreaded chronic condition, who is suffering from the pandemic, Asher Bahu Ha Nega, who it is revealed is associated with the spread of the plague. His clothing should be on his own volition, split such that it is easily opened. Param, torn in a manner that is less binding and thus more flexible. His head, specifically his eyes, nose, and mouth, Roshu, his face, should be avoided, kept away from, averted, shunned, and eschewed. Then upon his nose and lips, Shafham, the lower part of his face, he should cover it with a piece of cloth. He should wrap it with fabric. And then announce, Kara, consider me socially contaminated and affected. Tammy. That's 45. I'll just read 46. I know that you didn't go that far. But all the days, the infectious plague, Ha-Nega, the trauma associated with the expansive spread of the pandemic disease, which causes physical symptoms and suffering, is associated with him. he shall continually be considered extremely unclean and infected. He must be separated and distanced from others. He should constantly stay away from the residences and public places associated with the population centers of his household and settlement. Opposite of America.
Yes.
First of all, you the part of a person you want to stand away from is the mouth and the eyes and the nose and all of that sort of thing, because these things are can be airborne, or they can be spread a sneeze or a cough. Right. Second of all, Yah had it down a couple of thousand years before people figured it out, maybe 3,000 years before people figured it out. The sick person should wear a face mask. The sick person should wear the face mask. It doesn't do the healthy person any good to wear a face mask. These bacteria and viruses are really small, but it does us all a huge advantage if the sick person wears it, because they're not, if you look at a person speak, we actually project some of our the saliva and things that are in our mouth. Yeah, we do. And when we sneeze and that sort of thing. So it protects a healthy person is protected from a sick person. So he says, wear a piece of cloth over your mouth. And then it says that person that is infected should be separated as infected, and he should be consistently stay away from his home and the community. In other words, create a place out there for them where they can be quarantined so that they're not infecting the entire community. That way everybody else can go about their lives. That way people can work. They can take care of their families. They can go to school. They're free to move around. And the part that I didn't translate, because it goes on and on, it talks about how the priests, which God says, you're going to serve as the doctors here. This is how you should inspect them for whether or not they're contagious, and it's a 14-day period. And then he even gives them instructions on what to wash their clothes in, and the two ingredients have an antiviral, antibacterial agents in them. Dr. Yah.
Dr. Yah. Now, I shared that, I've been talking, one of the things that has really absorbed my week is I've been talking with a lot of the doctors with Terry. And I've shared these things with him. I shared some of the stuff about South Korea and how they used Google and they were finding everything, and so they knew who was there and who was infected. And I also pointed out, I used this line. I used this translation, and it was fun. I put it to them, and of course they could care less.
Of course.
It really annoyed me, but they could care less. And that it was written 3,000 years ago, and there it is. But it was just funny that San Francisco seems to be wanting to do that with the Google. They're doing that on a small scale. And that's a cheap way to find people, by the way. Whereas the other idea they thought was really cool is they think everybody should have an electronic thermometer, so they could take it and then we could all plug it in and they could find these giant clusters of temperature. Now that's wonderful, except it cost everybody would have to buy one. Of course, nobody's working and nobody could build them and nobody could send it or put them in. Nobody's making boxes and nobody's.
Yeah, and by the way, you have a problem with that, which is that the temperature increase for the coronavirus is in the range of 100 to 101 degrees. It's about 1 degree above normal. Well, I can tell you, I could go work outside, which now I'm prohibited from doing. I can't even walk on the beach here, which is the safest place I can possibly be. But that's the rules. But you walk outside and you work, you're going to have your body temperature going to rise a degree, 1 degree, and of the almost 2 million tests that's been given in America now, there are 5 times more people taking the test that have the flu than actually have the coronavirus. So if you had everybody with a thermometer, the vast majority of those people that have a temperature, that's the flu.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are you going to do? You're going to bring everybody with the flu into the hospital?
Can't.
No.
There's one other thing they're doing though that's is very scary is and I mentioned this to you over the phone before we began. Is they're taking the nursing care homes and using them now for the overload of people that they do have, and that's very scary because what you're doing is taking the coronavirus right to the place where the people are most vulnerable, the elderly, and the ones that are in a very weakened condition, and that's a different nurse. So it's everything you said.
And of course, there really aren't overloads. There were overloads in New York and Michigan for a brief time, in Louisiana and New Jersey, but even those are not overloaded now. The bigger issue right now is actually in those places is staffing, and the main reason that staffing is a problem. I don't want to talk to you about it, but the reason staffing is a problem is that most doctors are younger. It is typically a situation where doctors marry other doctors or nurses because these guys work 18 to 20 hours a day, and that's all they're surrounded with. And so one of the two has to stay home with their kids, and because they're younger and their kids are younger, they don't want to expose their kids to the disease. So either one of them is not working, so you've lost half of your staff, or neither of them are working because the kids aren't going to school. And so that has devastated the number of people that are available to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wonderful. Yep. So that's all part of the problem.
Well, let me ask you something, because what I wrote is I did my normal thing where I look at it from all different angles and the pictographs and so forth, and from the concrete language frame of making sure that this is what is understood by the population when they received this news. You know, these were Hebrews, and they thought concretely, or they thought according to the senses to understand words. And these words have always impressed me in that they have so much depth to them. And if I did it for no other reason to break them down, it would be just simply because it's fun to look at the letters. Look at the words and figure out what they all mean. So it's nothing bad that happens when I do this, even if I'm wrong. But
yeah, that's true.
So if I was studying for, I never care if I'm wrong.
And by the way, there's a really advantage occasionally of being wrong. I had a lovely exchange with somebody I had not, and it's almost once a week. Somebody writes that I didn't even know they were part of the covenant family, but this is an individual that wrote me and said, should we be concerned about the whole presentation of a Ma'aseh Yah and the earlier books, now that we know that Dowd is the Messiah and that Yosha is not the Messiah? And I said no. And the reason that it's a no is that, and I don't know how Yahweh managed to accomplish this in the books, but I came to recognize that Yosha was not the Messiah. It was obvious. Mm-hmm. There's not a single prophecy about him being the Messiah, and he never claims to be the Messiah, and he was never anointed as the Messiah. And so what I did, realizing the only time that Messiah is used in reference to a prophecy regarding him, it's an adjective, modifying messenger, not a title. I searched the Torah to find a title that would fit. And I should have just, in retrospect, I should have just chosen the one title that's ideal, which is Pesach El, Passover Lamb. But nonetheless, I looked for a title that would work. And there is one. 22 times we see this in the Torah. It's called Ma'aseh Yah. Ma'aseh is
doing the work
of. Yeah, the work. And so it's the work of Yah. And since Yosha is to be delivered and liberated and saved by Yah, and he's executing all this with Yahweh's soul, then it's a good fit. So it's actually, sometimes you get guided, I guess, that it turned out to be an accurate designation for him.
Yeah,
but
sure.
But the fact, even if it wasn't accurate, now that it's the whole joy of what we do is that lots of times we find out, there's a better, more accurate, more complete, more enlightening way to look at something, to see it, and every time you translate something, you see it with fresh eyes that have grown.
Exactly. Yeah. That was in my first draft.
Yeah, that was in your first draft. Okay.
But look at the evolution of Yasha in your writing. It went from slaves to rescue to be free.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with translating Yasha as saved, except that's actually its derivative connotation. And you look at every lexicon, and it's there. Every lexicon will tell you that the primary meaning of the word is to be delivered. Yeah. Delivered from what? Delivered from man's stuff like the way we're fighting the coronavirus. Delivered from religion and politics and just stupidity of man. It's being delivered. And then God's view is the opposite of man's. You don't solve anything by depriving people of their freedom. The Yasha means to liberate, to provide freedom. And if you deliver somebody from man's corrupting and oppressive, subjugating schemes, and you provide man with freedom and with liberty, you've saved him.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know that until I was dealing with Dowd, and all of a sudden it's just one of his psalms that says,
bingo.
It's obvious here, but this is the way it really should be rendered, and it fits better. So I don't think that's I don't have now any regrets over any of this at this point. I think that our willingness to grow and to go where the words lead and to become smarter about it with time is a good thing, and it's not a bad. It's a good thing.
The only way you grow.
Yeah. Yeah, growing's good. Being wrong is good if you find out that you're wrong and you have a chance to correct it, right?
Yeah. I want to be right. So if I'm wrong, I want to learn that I'm wrong so I can stop being wrong.
Correct.
Yeah, good. Absolutely.
Correct. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm wrong, it really does frustrate me. Something, like when I thought that I knew that Paul didn't write the inspired word of God. It was just too poorly written. But at least I thought that he was on the right side, and so I included some of Paul's statements in my first version of Yada Yahweh, and that upset me. Okay, it's so obviously untrue. He's so corrupt. How in the world could you have fallen for that, you idiot? So sometimes I really do feel pretty stupid.
This is a rather big body of work. It's hard, you can't be hard on yourself with that. This is huge and with great depth. So, it's quite a challenge to get through even small parts of it. But let me ask you this, because this is what I did, and this is why I sent you. I sent you the thing. And especially this week, it came home again because I was studying Yada Yahweh in the Peace Out chapter. Because obviously we were celebrating Pesach and Masa and Bakurim today, and you wrote, as I mentioned in here, that Yahweh, I'm paraphrasing, but Yahweh is he's always concerned with his children's welfare, both on the corporal level as well as the spiritual level. And so this is obviously on the corporal level. This is how don't get sick and don't die, and we need you to be healthy because I can't build a relationship with you if everybody dies off. I mean, some of this is really straight.
And he wasn't saying that. You can. You notice he didn't say you can pray to me and I will cure the sick person, did he?
No, he said this is the way you keep it away from him.
Right. This is how your society and the family can continue to function with diseases.
Right.
Very different than the way that the Christian will say, well, let's pray over them and we'll get a healing. Well, all those guys
lay hands on them.
Christian healers, they're all complete frauds. They're all frauds. They're doing it for money.
Of course.
Oh,
Benny, what's his
keep
name
coming to church. God will protect us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Watch.
So basically,
watch how that works out for you.
Yeah. So basically, I said, I was thinking to myself, and this thing is kind of written like the way I was thinking. A plague is a plague is a plague. So, and the other thing is, he's just as concerned about our spiritual chance to get to be with Him, which entails avoiding religion, which is a plague is a plague is a plague. So I looked along that.
Quarantine the religious. Yeah, get them outside of your community.
And
cover their mouth so they can't talk.
Very good.
Cover their mouth. That's right, so they can't talk. Right.
And I point that out. I say, you look up in all these lexicons. It says that's one of the main is to cover it, and so you won't spew out this awful damn poison that they're doing. So, and when I finally get to the second verse, slowly but surely, I'll find that embedded in all of those words is more than enough material. Now I know to come up with that concept. Now I know how you approach it and how you approach that, and you're very, very focused because you were focusing on this. But I have time to play, so I can look down there and just say, oh look, this could also mean, or if we could apply it to that, and there it is. Truly, there it is. And then I use the picture graphs too, because as you and I have found over the last number of years that the directions they are going and how they are placed side by side also reinforces these ideas that and the meanings, and many, many times that's there as well. So that's what is there. I just wish I could have put the letters in there so it'd be a little more interesting. But I wrote them out by that. But the whole concept was, and when you get the other one, then I'll let y'all pick it apart, and then we'll then if it's worthy, we'll send it over to JB, and if he's kind enough, and put it on there. So, but it's interesting. It gives you another little angle. I can't be you, and I can't be JB. I mean, I just ain't got it. But I can look at pictures, and I can understand words, and I enjoy that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like me that just would enjoy that immensely. There's no pressure. You just do it, and it's fun. It's absolutely fun. But do hit the save button.
But do hit the yes.
I never had to hit the save button with my pads over here. But I rarely lose a legal pad. But so it was phenomenal that all these things could easily be juxtaposed to both angles. Now, there was one thing you asked me too, which I didn't put in this, is about why I thought about the three Babylons. They kind of they were at the early stages, at least, they were being hit pretty hard, but we've already come to the conclusion that obviously America is a big target. Otherwise, he would be drawing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he's drawing out Yehudim, which are there. There is no question about the nastiness of the Babylon, which became Canaanite, which became Roman Catholic. I mean, they're exactly the same filth that he started with. And, of course, there is the original Babylon in the Middle East, and whether it be Iran, Iraq, or whatever, they're joined together at the hip. They've announced it. They've placed themselves to it. So it was interesting that it was hit all those places. Now, the one thing that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that what's interesting when you're talking about geographic Babylon is that at the end of this chapter we're using right now as a platform for this particular program in last week, it ends with one of the declarations that is important about Dowd, and it's the one that speaks of the Towrah. And it concludes by God saying from which general regions he's going to be calling his children. And the list that he has here, and he has other lists in other places, but the list here is all geographic Babylon with one ode political Babylon. And so we looked at Leah and I took some time and did an analysis of DNA studies in those areas, and it's a huge. In fact, we put it in the chapter by country. A huge percentage of Jews. DNA is revealing that, and everything from Iran to Jordan to Syria to Arabia through Yemen. That there's a very, very high percentage of Jews where the dominant male DNA, Y chromosome DNA, is Jewish.
Well, to complete that, those are the three, and obviously they're now did God hit them with it? I don't know. It's the same terminology a lot of times in what when he visited these plagues on Egypt, which I thought was quite interesting. And there's a lot of little things that you can put together there as well. But regardless, they're certainly getting a little thump prematurely, or not prematurely, but early. The only other thing was the China connection. But ever since you did that research on China and how fast they would be growing to 500 million Christians by year 2033, they are the big player in the Fourth World War, if we want to call it the First one a World War. So, so it doesn't surprise me at all that this filth came there. And it just is.
China's working very hard to be the major player on the world stage. It'll be interesting to see, how China has become the second largest economy in the world by essentially having a draconian communist government, but with free enterprise. So the economics of China are free enterprise, and the government of China is total control with the communist system. And to see how that is going to play, and how the growth of Christianity will play in that country. And there's a lot of discontent right now in China over the cover-up, a number of people that actually died, which is, I did spent on this particular chapter quite some time analyzing the number that likely died in Hunan province, and rather than the 2,500 the Chinese admit, the number is probably closer to 40 to 45,000, and a lot of discontent. So they may have a coup there in China. It's a tough thing to pull off with all the electronic controls. China is working very hard now, convincing the world that they are here they were the source of this virus, but they're offering to save the world by giving them Chinese-made masks and tests. Now the masks don't work and the tests don't work, and it's all rubbish. But nonetheless, they are working very hard to create the image that they are the new superpower to turn to, not the United States. And so they are flexing their economic muscle and their political muscle around the world.
Well, I'm sorry to hear the masks don't work, because they're using those in California.
Yeah, the masks have been highly suspect. And most of the masks now that are being made in China are not being made by the original companies, but being made by companies that have just started up recently and have no quality control. The people who make them don't wear face masks. They don't wear gloves on their hands. They're sending out contaminated products. 80% of the Chinese coronavirus tests were faulty. Recently, they've been sending out those gowns that doctors wear and nurses wear to protect themselves, and they pull them out of the box and they disintegrate just as they try to open them. China's capable of making good things, but for the most part, they're absolutely capable of making junk. So that's the way it is. Without the kind of incentives that you really have in a totally free enterprise system, you're just not going to get the right kind of value. That's why the Taiwanese play such an important role in mainland China. All right, so here we are.
That was it.
Yeah, So let's talk a little bit about back to Psalm 119, Mizmor 119. I'll pick it up maybe verse 9. It says, it is more beneficial, Tob, it is more desirable and pleasing, joyous, agreeable, beautiful, valuable, fortuitous and good, to be protected, chasah, to find safety, comfort, rest, by trusting in deliverance by Yahweh, than it is to trust in leaders or government officials. That's the line that ought to be plastered everywhere. You see, you go into or just drive by a church. I won't go into a church, but you always see the American flag, both outside.
Mm-hmm.
There's one inside. This idea of the Surgeon General in his snappy little uniform, speaking on behalf of his Christian God. The governor speaking on behalf of Michigan of the Easter Bunny. The President of the United States talking about all the things that are going to happen by Easter Sunday. So you can choose.
Oh.
You can choose. Everybody has this choice. And 99.999% of the world chooses governments. They choose to be protected by, their military. They're providing our freedoms. We ought to be honoring them. Let's honor our first responders. And God says, no, it's a lot better, a lot safer, a lot more beneficial. It's Tob in every sense of that word to be protected by Yahweh rather than government officials. There is this correlation between godliness and patriotism in most countries. And politicians end their speeches by, God bless France or God bless America. And the fact is that God's not blessing any political entity.
No.
And it's like when Shamuel went to Yahweh, when the people wanted to have Shaul to be their king in Gentile fashion, and Shaul said, "I'm so sorry, I have failed you. They have chosen, they want to end this your preference, which is to have Shaphat judges render decisions based on the Torah, and that to be the guidance and direction for the people. And now they want to have a king." And where God says, no, they're not rejecting you, Shamuel. They're rejecting me. Dowd here, who was the only really successful king in Israel, God finally said, listen, if you want a king, Shaul's not going to work for you. I'm going to remove my spirit from him. But if that's what you want, at least I will start you out correctly. I'll give you a shepherd king. I will show you what a shepherd can do if a shepherd is elevated to that position. And a lot of people want to think of Dowd as this great army leader and fighter. Well, the fact is, Dowd didn't fight for conquest. He didn't fight to occupy other territories. He fought defensive battles to protect his people from being invaded. And that's the only time that God would say, if you want one, I'll at least give you the example that will work. But other than that, it's a choice. You can choose to trust God or trust man. And Yahweh was saying that government officials, Nadib, institutional rulers, nobility, princes, liberal ideas, that which is incited and impelled. Don't do that. Then it says, every nation and ethnicity circle around and surround me. In the name of Yahweh, I will indeed continually fend them off. Ki mul him. As a result, I will stop them and either circumcise them or cause them to cease to exist, dividing and separating them by cutting them off. Mizmor lyrics to be sung, Psalm 118:10. Huh, pretty amazing, huh? So what Dowd is saying is that the Goy every ethnicity other than Yisrael, every nation, that they have decided they're going to encircle Israel. They're going to claim it for themselves or for others. And so when Dowd comes back, he says, no, in the name of Yahweh, I'm going to fend them off. I'm going to stop them. So God's got his king doing the defensive fighting once again, and this time the victims who will be cut off and killed are Gentiles. Now, you would say, well, I'm a Gentile. In fact, Kirk, you're Gentile. JB, you're Gentile.
I walked away from it.
Yeah, I did. I walked away from the Gentile governance, the Gentile religions, and I chose to associate with Yisrael. And we choose to speak on behalf of Yahudim, and we lift up Yahweh's name and his covenant and have become part of his covenant. And so we are one with Yisrael as Yisrael was intended, Yisrael is presented in the Torah. And by so doing, we become even Yahudah, beloved of Yah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. So it says here that I was thrust aside and pushed to the limit. This is Dowd speaking now. I was thrust aside and pushed to the limit. Dakah. I was exposed to a dangerous situation and thought to be weakened, tottering, and on the verge of becoming overthrown, driven away, such that I was someone to be neglected and considered inferior. I was thought to be fallen in stature, dead, failed and over with. But Yahweh, he rendered assistance, and he helped me. Azar Ani. He came to my aid and supported me, increasing my value and ability. Here's Yahweh coming to Dowd's assistance. You know, how many people want to serve God, right? God said, no, I'm going to work for Dowd. That's the way I like to go. That's the way Yahweh rolls, man. I'm going to work for him rather than have Dowd the other way around. And so what Dowd is saying here is that, I've been neglected. I've been considered inferior. I've been considered dead. Well, there's only really one group of people that have done that, Pauline Christians. What they have done is they've taken every promise that God made to Dowd and they've given it to their Jesus. Messiah, Son of God, branch, King of Kings, Kingdom of God, Shepherd. They've given them all to Dowd. To their Jesus when God gave them all to Dowd. They have relegated you to nothing. You realize when you read about Paul's first discussion about Dowd, he said, he's dead and his body is decaying. Yeah, well, that's what this says. It says, they're writing me off as dead and meaningless. But Yahweh's not going to have it. No. Dowd's very much alive. Dowd is coming back. There's no second coming to Jesus, but there sure is a second coming of Dowd. And the kingdom of Yisrael, the entire earth, is going to belong to Dowd. He's the king. If you don't like him, you're not going to like eternity in heaven very much. No, it's true. I've got a bromance with the guy. Dowd's my favorite dude. I do have, there's another bromance that I have to admit. My other bromance is with Elia. Ever since I read Elia's sarcasm, I have been a real fan of Elia. So I'll probably, just sit around Elia and let him tell jokes. That dude is funny. But Dowd's a man's man. He's strong, he's aggressive, he's steadfast, he's unwavering, strong personality, puts Yahweh first, brilliant, great singer. we call him a Renaissance man today. He's got it all.
Yes. Yeah.
He's got it all. And so what we hear here is that God is working for Dowd. And that's the way it should be. Because he's Dowd's father.
Yeah.
And as Dowd's father, he wants to do everything to help his son be effective. And God's got his credibility on the line with Dowd. Why?
Yes.
Because if you read the story in Samuel, God picked him. He said, that's my guy, anoint him. That's it. That's my guy. And so God's got his credibility on the line with Dowd. Dowd has no chance whatsoever to make a single statement in any one of his songs that's untrue. Not one. God's credibility is on the line with Dowd. And not to worry. They're a really good team.
Okay.
This now says Yah. And, you know, I refer to Yahowah more as Yah than I do Yahweh. And the other individual that does that is Dowd.
Just happens to
Yah.
be.
He says Yah. Yah's my source of strength and power and the best of who I am. Don't you just love that? Yah is my source of strength and power. Oz Ani, my force and fortification, my ability to withstand whatever comes my way and prevail, and the best of who I am. It makes me valuable, able to sing, a compound of ma to inquire about, and mizmor. In other words, he is the essence, the insights that provide the lyrics to these songs. I was talking with my youngest son, who we did a virtual Pesach with. And we did Pesach a little differently. I'm not recommending this, not endorsing it. It's just I had made a kind of a special dispensation with Dad on this one. I celebrated Pesach on one day later than probably everybody else did with Leah. And my son is in Indiana, and we did a virtual Pesach and included him with it. And I celebrated Pesach a day late for a reason, and that was that I had started and I was halfway through and was continuing just to be thrilled with being an eyewitness to the fulfillment of Pesach. For the first time in 10 years, I was translating Mizmor 22, Psalm 22, which is Dowd's eyewitness account of what happened on Pesach. And to be translating it and living it and experiencing it as part of Pesach, which is such a wonderful,
pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah, experience. It was really special. And during that conversation, both Leah and my son Blake were talking about their concerns over the coronavirus and how, you know, all the things they were doing to keep us safe. And they turned to me, you know, I said, everybody's afraid of this thing. He says, no, I'm not. I'm an extrovert. I'm out talking to people. I'm engaged. If somebody comes in this marina, I'm the first person out there to grab lines and to help them. Somebody wants to talk about Yah, I'll spend 2 hours talking, 3 hours talking about Yah. I'm not the least bit concerned. Why? Because so long as we are doing what Yah wants done, it's in Yahweh's interest, just as it was in Dowd's interest.
Well, that's the point.
Yahweh's interest with Dowd.
Yeah.
Right, to take care of him. I'm not going to be stupid. I wash my hands. I stay my 6 feet. You know, I'm not being stupid, but I realize that if you're engaged doing what Yah does, once done, then Yah has a vested interest. And by the way, Yah's vested interest isn't in you or me or anyone that is doing what we're doing. It's not. I mean, he has an interest in us because we're covenant members. But his primary interest in us is what we are doing for him relative to his children. There's only 14 years left, and he wants to reach out to his children. 13 years left. He wants to reach out to his children and call them home. And unfortunately, his children aren't listening. So, he had to recruit some goyim to get this job done. And so it's in his interest to enable us to do this job. And so, no, I'm not the least bit concerned. Right. It's not words. It's God's got an agenda, and so long as we're assisting with that agenda, it's cool. Boy, I want to tell you something else, though. I have lots of trepidation now talking about the Chodar thing, because as I went through the translation of everything he had to say about the Chodar, and there's some parts in there that made me really, 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 really uncomfortable. And so, but there are some things that are really reassuring. And the beginning of that discussion speaks about how we can all be stems grafted into the branch that is Dowd. And in so doing, we can be empowered by the Spirit. And there's this whole list of 7 different ways that the Spirit empowers us, enables us, emboldens us to do this job. And you ought not do this if you're timid. This is a bold undertaking. And the ability, the boldness, the courage, but it's primarily the intellectual capacity to analyze these words and to convey them meaningfully, to perceive the insights that can be derived from them and to share them, of which there's thousands that probably haven't been considered in a couple of thousand years that we're sharing for the benefit of all who would listen. But it's amazing to read specifically how Yahweh will use his Spirit to empower us. And the thing about the 2 Zeroah that come to mind, and it's a little different with Moshe than it was with the other 2. But it is very similar with us. Dowd, when Yahweh said, "I'm going to anoint Dowd to make," Yahweh said, Dowd said, "The best of what I am is because of Yah." That immediately the Spirit of Yahweh came upon Dowd in a very powerful way, God said, and never left him. That is what made Dowd the Son of God. The Spirit of Yahweh came upon Yosha sometime about the time he was 30 years old, and did leave him, left him at the fulfillment of Pesach. And with Moshe, it was a little different in the sense that, as Yah said, the one thing that was different about Moshe that I didn't do with anybody else is that all of my communication with Moshe was face to face, which was quite different. But so in his depiction of this stem and how he's going to use this insignificant implement to reach out to his people and call them home, based upon what grows out of Dowd. He talks about the Spirit coming on this individual that empowers the individual so that he can think and understand and teach, learn and then teach. And that is what, when Dowd says that Yah is my source of strength and power, that's what he's talking about. That's how that occurs. When he says that Yahweh is the best of who I am, and therefore he's the insights that are derived when you think about the Mizmor, that's precisely what he's saying. This is the mechanism for it. It's the Spirit's involvement in our lives. He exists for me as a means to liberty, deliverance and salvation, La Yeshua, as a source of rescue, safety, and a means to freedom, as well as a savior. Now, what's interesting here, of course, is that Dowd was a real prophet. Dowd's prophetic statements are powerful. Every one of his Mizmor songs is filled with insightful and precisely accurate prophetic statements. When we get to the end of this chapter, we talk about the Towrah, which is symbolic of really what God would like us all to be, where we are stems off of this branch. God says specific of this individual, I am not going to reveal myself to him through visions. Which, when he's talking about Moshe, he says, look, when Moshe was face to face, everybody else is through these visions. We're going to communicate through them with words and visions. And he says, no, that's not the way with visions I'm going to inspire this Towrah, which is to say, he ain't going to be a prophet. No, thank God. Standard there is there's. Yeah, not good. So he's not going to be a prophet. What he's going to do is he's going to read what I conveyed through the prophets, and then share it.
Yeah.
He's already said everything he needs to say. Yeah. And so the way that the Spirit inspires us, the way that the Spirit enables us to see and comprehend these insights, the way that we are able to be students and then teachers, is to listen to what Yahweh had to say. And with the Spirit's influence, we are able to understand it and communicate it more effectively. And I think it really is the combination of being able to read it and listen to it as part of these programs that helps. So that was Mizmor 18:14. 18:15 reads as follows. There is the sound of pronounced jubilation and freedom within the temporary dwelling places of those who are right. The rightful orientation of Yahweh engages and acts with strength and ability. The right hand of Yahweh lifts up. Right.
Right, yeah.
It's not about faith. It's not about belief. It's not about being good. It's not about being charitable. It's about being right. Dowd was right. Yahweh was right. And there is tremendous jubilation, tremendous freedom in being right. Being right is the most empowering thing that can possibly happen to a person, particularly when it pertains to God. And when you're right with God, you are completely free. That's one of the most exciting parts of all of this, is the freedom that goes along with it, because God's not asking you to obey him when you become part of his family. He's not asking you to worship him. He's not asking you to submit yourself to his will. No. When you are part of his family, when the Spirit comes upon you, when you're studying his word, you are free, liberated. We translate because that's what we choose to do, not because that's what we have to do. We share because it's what we want to do. We're free.
Of course.
Having the rightful orientation of Yahweh, that perspective, well, for example, on the coronavirus, the moment we began to learn of it and we saw how people were responding to it, immediately we're able to say, the world's reacting to this wrong, and the consequences are going to be grievous. And then we read that, yes, that's Yahweh's perspective too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see the facts all laid out before us, and his perspective is right. That orientation is so empowering. And it's Yahweh's hand that lifts us up. God doesn't want us to lift him up. That's silly. But he's here to lift us up. Mizmor 118:17 reads, I shall not experience a prolonged death. Instead, I will continue to live so that I might recount, record, and relate the work of Yah. That was Dowd's life. Yeah, it was Dowd's life. And one of the things that makes Dowd so remarkable is that it would be really stupid to try to follow the example of the Pesach lamb now, wouldn't it? Or somebody thinks, I'm going to follow Jesus' example. What would Jesus do? He sacrificed himself as the Passover lamb. You probably ought not do that. That's a really dumb idea.
He did that so we wouldn't have to.
There you go.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
But Dowd's example we can follow.
Yeah.
And so when Dowd said, I live so that I can recount, record, and relate the work of Yah. Now, we're not going to relate and record the work of Yah the way Dowd did. You know, Dowd was not only a prophet, he was the Messiah. He was God's chosen shepherd. He was the Son of God, and he was a prophet. It puts him in the company of one. But we can become children of God. We can learn from the prophets. We can share what the prophets like Dowd said. We can recount, record, and relate the work of Yah by studying what the prophets revealed. Mm-hmm. We can do this. We can follow his example. And we know that God loved Dowd for doing this. Because
of that.
Exactly. And so we then have that same opportunity. Well, kind of in closing, because we're going to be cut off here momentarily. We're still recording but not broadcasting. We've got a pretty good group of listeners, though, still on the phone that can still hear us. Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. They are an inclusive whole. One without the other is counterproductive. Together, they are the best life can offer. Pesach opens the doorway to life. Unlike what the Surgeon General said, God did not die. Passover lamb sacrificed its life so that we might live. And we are nourished by that sacrifice. We benefit from that sacrifice. It's the Pesach sacrifice that opens the doorway not only to eternal life, but to Shamayim, to heaven, to God's door. But Pesach, eternal life, even if you were to be circumcised as a male, you were to accept all of the terms and conditions of the covenant, but you celebrate Pesach, but don't simultaneously observe matzah. It's counterproductive. Hugely counterproductive. That's the reason that matzah and Pesach happen to work together. Is because matzah perfects us. Matzah removes the fungus of religion and politics from us, our Torahlessness, so that we, like Dowd, can be perfect, tzedak, right with Yah. And with the two combined, we are then not only eternal, but we're eternal and perfected, which gives us the opportunity to enter God's company. But you don't want to enter God's company as a malach. You don't want to enter God's company as one of the implements. He's given you the opportunity to enter his company as family. And that's the purpose of Bikurim, firstborn children. So we have Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim that work as a collective whole that introduces into God's family, that open the door to heaven, to eternal life, perfect us along the way, and then see to it that we are adopted into his covenant family. That's the purpose of these 3 days. And when they are celebrated in harmony, in conjunction with one another, they deliver the best that God and life have to offer. We'll read one last statement from Psalm 118 because it speaks specifically of the statement that I made a long time ago. It says, "I shall not experience a prolonged death. I shall continue to live so that I can recount and relate the work of Yah." Now, what do you think work of Yah is?
What we're doing.
How is that written? How is that written? I'll give you a clue. It is exactly the word that I used for Yosha, because I knew he wasn't the Messiah. It is Maaseh Yah. That's how it's written in the Psalm. It is Maaseh Yah. And so we know we're right with Maaseh Yah, because that is exactly what Dowd wrote there, is Maaseh Yah. And what is he talking about here? To recount, record, and relate the work of Yah. What work did Yah do that was more important than fulfilling and enabling the promises of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim? And who was it that recorded and related, recounted what happened on those 3 days?
Always Dowd.
Dowd.
He's the heart of it.
Mizmor 22. Detail after detail, stroke after stroke. It's the presentation of precisely what happened on that day. You know, just the last statement that I happened to translate on Mizmor 22 before the show began. It was about the folks that are casting lots and choosing to gamble for Yosha's apparel. And of course, what the Christians did, say, well, this is talking about Jesus, so boy, we better have a prophecy in here that says that it was fulfilled, and that we can give our guy credibility by saying, they cast lots for his clothing. Yeah, come on, it's meaningless to say that. Why did Dowd quote Yosha as saying that they cast lots for my clothing? Yeah, it's so obvious and so important. Here is Yosha fulfilling something so extraordinary, that he is in the midst of enabling us to live forever, opening the doorway to heaven and to eternal life. And what are the Romans doing? They're down there in the dirt throwing pebbles around, trying to figure out who gets to steal his clothes. Oblivious to the single most important day in human history. Right there, they're eyewitnesses to the single most important and extraordinary thing that's ever happened between man and God. And they're down there in the dirt, throwing little pebbles around so they can decide who gets to keep his garments. That's what happened with Christianity. What did Christianity do? They offered everything to their God, their man God, except his real name, except his real title, except his real purpose.
Real purpose. I was going to say that. Except his real purpose.
They're just so preoccupied with being religious that they forgot his name. They forgot his real title, which is Pesach El, and they forgot his purpose. That's the reason that story exists. And so you just go through it word for word, and it's as if you were there and you just realize the brilliance of everything all the way through. Including the statement that was right before there, where they bore through or pierced my hands and feet, and you have the Dead Sea Scrolls affirming that's the terminology that's used there. And so here is Dowd 1,000 years before it occurs, almost 1,000 years before the Romans came up with the idea of crucifixion using nails, specifically describing it. 1,000 years before that form of capital punishment even existed. And he's speaking of driving nails through hands and feet. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, very.
He's a real prophet. He was doing what prophets do, recounting, recording, and relating the Maaseh Yah, the work of Yah. Well, with that, continue to enjoy Pesach Matzah and Bikurim. The beauty of Matzah, it is a full week-long celebration where we get to enjoy the benefits of having our souls unleavened, removing all of the fungus of yeast, which is religion and politics, from us, so that Yahweh can look at us as being perfected in His sight.
What a wonderful night.
Be safe. Yeah, be safe out there. Recognize that it is always better to rely on Yahweh than it is on human leaders.
Thank you, guys.
May Yah bless you all, and thank you, Blog Talk Radio, for actually working this time, so there's no frustration at all. And logging on, and I'm all smiles, and I'm sorry for being so aggravated the last time, but it is so. That's the one thing that frustrates me. You know, you come into this program, I'm always excited to be able to do this with you guys. I'm excited to be able to share the words that Yahweh has and the insights that can be derived for them, and we've always done this so that it would be spontaneous, because it's more genuine that way. And we're family. It should be relaxed. We're not trying to impress anybody. This isn't like the Christian dinner and a show.
No.
We do this before of the love of Yah and His words. But the one thing that will get me aggravated from time to time is when the techno stuff is working against us. So we just can't make it work. So it was nice this time to be able to relax, and it all just worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, happy Shabbat, happy Matzah and Bikurim, and the shadow of Pesach. May we enjoy these benefits forever. Good night.
Okay. Night, y'all. Shalom.
Shalom.